Hello. My name is Elaine Simons, and I'm the foster mother of Jesse Sarey, and I am filling in as a guest host for Reverend Harriett and for the Mother Justice Show. And I'm going to allow my guest to also introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Monisha Harrell, she, her pronouns, and I worked on the initiative 940, which passed in 2018, which was a initiative to de-escalate, to promote de-escalation for law enforcement in interactions with the public.
Welcome. I'm very excited to have you. We're going to spend We're going to work in a couple sections here. We'll start off. I'm going to give just a little bit of history about what Jesse's background that led into where we invited you. For any of our guests that are listening today, we had just completed almost a 6-year process on May 31st, 2019. My foster son, Jesse Sarey, was murdered by former officer Jeff Nelson of Auburn Police Department. And at that time, and Monisha will go more detail, but I had voted for this thing called I-940 and had really no idea how important of a role it was going to play in getting resolution, accountability, and justice for Jesse. Um, so basically, just to kind of give you a little how it moved forward, and then Monisha will share the ballot piece and the initiative, and then I will come back again and just fill in about the trial and that journey. Um, but around, I would say around December of 2019, we were approached by the prosecution office of Dan Sandberg at the time. And they had said that they were taking a look at our case and looking at seeing if they could move it forward under the I-940 initiative. At that time, I thought that was an inquest. I didn't know that this was something that was actually going to go a different trajectory than many families who end up going the inquest route, and then they end up knowing if they're going to get a prosecution. So for months, I just kind of allow that to play out. And then we entered into COVID, and COVID was a game changer. All of a sudden, the two prosecutors, Mark and Kathy from King County, met with us and said, we're not sure what COVID's going to do. We're very intentional. We want to move this forward. And then at that time, Mark had said that he was retiring from the King County Prosecution Office, but that he had arranged with Dan Sandberg that he was going to stay on the case, that they were going to continue to hold his license and allow him to continue to be the prosecutor, but he was retiring. And so that was the beginning of that 6-year journey. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop here because the story will continue. But I want Monisha to share with us why I-940? What happened in 2018 that brought something so amazing forward?
That's a really interesting question, and it's the end of the story of Initiative 940 was 2018, or the end of a chapter, I should say, because I do think that the conviction of Officer Nelson is closer to the end of the story. But that work actually began many, many years before then. Initiative 940 passed in the ballot in November of 2018, but the work around that had begun by impacted family members many, many years before that point. And so And what a lot of people don't remember is that there was an initiative attempt before 940 as well, that we just weren't successful in getting all of the signatures we needed in order to be able to bring that to the ballot. So I say that because people always remember the successes, but those successes are filled, it's a pathway filled of, setbacks and failures. And so 940 we remember, but we forget its predecessors. And so really it began many years beforehand with impacted family members seeing that there was no justice for their loved ones who were killed in engagements with law enforcement. One of the features was you had to prove malice in order to even have an opportunity to be able to get some justice. And so one of the elements of 940 removed the prosecutor's burden to have to prove malice, which of course you can really only determine malice. You can't determine what's going on in somebody else's head while there is an incident occurring. And so short of somebody literally talking through every single thought as they are harming somebody, you would never be able to prove malice. So 940 ended up being the culmination of a number of impacted family members' pathway towards justice. And those family members spanned many different demographics across Washington state. We had impacted family members from the Black community, impacted family members from the Native community, impacted family members from the Asian community. And those impacted family members were our center for being able to bring this initiative forward. So I joined the group right around 2016 in a prior initiative where we were seeking signatures to bring this initiative forward to the legislature. And we weren't quite able to get all of the signatures we needed that year and had to go back to the drawing board. There's so many different components that you have to get right on this. You have to get the right language on the initiative. It has to be able to pass legal challenges. And so we had somebody who was a former drafter of legislation who actually took the impacted family member stories and knew the law and was able to help draft the initiative. And then you have to shop that language around to legislators to see, what feedback that they have, because there's a couple different pathways you can go. Before you get to an initiative, you could just go directly to a legislator to see if they would be willing to carry your bill, if they would be willing to take it to Olympia and carry it. Going to an initiative position is one of the most expensive ways to be able to bring this forward, because it costs money to do all of the legal challenges on the pathway to getting the initiative. And then in order to collect signatures, you have to be able to print up all of the signature forms. You have to be able to raise money to pay campaign workers. You have to be able to raise the money to pay signature gatherers. And then ultimately, anybody who is in opposition to this is going to have legal challenges. And so you have to be able to pay for all of the legal challenges along the way. So it is definitely not something you see often. But the reason people would go to an initiative process is if there's not enough political will to do it through a more traditional legislative process. And that was really a lot of the challenge, is there were a lot of people who didn't think that there was enough political will in order to pass this at the legislature, within the legislature. And so we had to take the initiative route because that was really our only pathway forward. So it really becomes a pathway of the only means necessary, or the only means available to us to be able to bring this change forward. And that's how that's how it came about.
So from what I'm hearing, you chose to go this route over what I see a lot of the Washington Coalition for Police Accountability, and those are bills that they're trying to pass through that type of way. Um, when you talk about the signature piece, can you talk a little bit about how you got out there to start gathering signatures? And quickly, I just want to welcome you, Ashley. Right at after the intermission, we'll bring you on so that way we can finish this piece, okay?
Thank you.
So we didn't set out to go the signature route. We actually, the coalition actually desired to go the legislative route because it is, like I said, a lot less cost intensive. And nobody within the group had the financial means to be able to do this work, going the signature pathway. So, a piece of legislation like this, you bring it to legislators in hopes that somebody would be willing to bring it forward, in hopes that somebody would be willing to sponsor it and get it on the floor and have a pathway forward. So the signature gathering phase was absolutely not our first choice. It became the only choice because we didn't have a pathway forward in the legislature. So after many years of trying and failing at the legislature, this was something that the impacted family members felt strongly enough about to put together the coalition that could bring it forward through signatures and initiative ballot.
Thank you. We're going to take a break and come back and continue this engaging conversation.
The Mother's Justice Show is brought to you by H.G. Walden and the Virtues Healing Circles. Join us for Wisdom and Wellness with Reverend Walden, a monthly virtual and in-person healing circle that focuses on community healing and growth. Learn more at virtueshealing.com. That's virtueshealing.com. Also, be sure to join our healing group on Facebook. Again, visit us at virtueshealing.com today.
Hi, welcome back to Mother's Justice Show. For people that are just tuning in, we are discussing the origins of I-940 and how Washington State is unique in being a ballot state that is able to do this. I was beginning the story of Jesse, and each time I come back, I'm going to give you a little bit more. So when I left off, I had mentioned that the prosecution was interrupted because of COVID. And so it was like all of a sudden we weren't sure if there was ever going to move forward. And then in August of 2020, we were met by the prosecution, Dan Sannenberg and the team, and that's when they announced to us that they were getting ready to go in and arrest and charge Officer Jess Nelson for second-degree murder and first-degree assault of Jesse Sarey. And we didn't know that this 1 year mark almost was going to then be another 4 years of continuances. I would like to bring on Ashley McKenzie. And what I would like you to do, Ashley, is let us know who you are, who's your beloved son, and where you're coming from, and why I-940 and getting rid of quantified immunity is so important for you.
Hello. Well, thank you for having me. Of course. This is our second time in 2 weeks?
Yep.
So definitely grateful. I am Ashley McKenzie Smith, and I am the mother of Jalen McKenzie, a 20-year-old Atlanta native that was killed in Memphis, Tennessee during a traffic stop, December 16th, 2022. So that's the reason why I'm here. That's the reason why I fight. I didn't even know this was a whole movement until it just popped up at my door. But I am blessed to have met so many amazing people And now I see, I guess, what my calling is. And that is say their name monuments. And what we do is we remember loved ones who have tragically died by gun violence, police brutality, you name it, we're saying their name. It originally started out as police brutality, and then it kind of grew to other areas. As more and more people want their loved ones remembered, they want their legacies out. And so that's just one of the things that we're going to do is we're trying to change the narrative on a lot of these stories. The media put out one thing, and then when we do some research, kind of find out the story looks a little different. So, along with putting out the legacy of these lost loved ones here, we have to change the narrative. And one of the narratives that have to be changed, or one of the things that have to be changed in this movement, is qualified immunity. It is one of probably the worst things that anybody can experience when they're dealing with a loved one that has lost their life to police brutality. For someone to say, "I fear for my life," and then your loved one's life meant nothing, that is qualified immunity. I feared for my life, and they were able to take that person's life regardless, and the law backs them up. That's pretty much in a nutshell of what qualified immunity is. And what's so sad is that we can't do that as civilians. I can't go and say I fear my life and then, I'm out and walking the street. There are stipulations to that. There are laws to that. There are things that have to back those evidence up. Whereas in police officers, law enforcement, they just get away with it just because they have a hard job. Pretty much that's what it is. Because they
Thank
have to
you.
wear a badge, because they have to get out here and supposed to serve and protect, then they can get away and say, "Hey, I fear for my life," and that's good enough. Whereas for you and me, we don't have that option. And so it was really interesting when I met Elaine, and I think, what was it, Minnesota? Was it Minnesota?
Minneapolis.
Minneapolis. Yeah, we were somewhere with an M. And and we just clicked. And it's really interesting when you find really good people that you can link up with, then the journey is not as hard, or is not as stressful. So I know that a lot of people have come before me. They've walked this journey, and I've learned a lot from them. They're like veterans in the game, and they make my job a whole lot easier because they've already walked the walk. They've already been through a lot of struggles. And as long as you can love and listen, those are really key, then the struggles, the emotional part will always be there. But the work is less hard when you just listen and love. And so this, with the Jesse Sarey story and the whole Washington being a ballot, and I'm from the South, so I'm in Atlanta. We're definitely not a ballot state, okay? And it will probably be a long way before we can even address that. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do, is work with a lot of lawmakers and citizens in the South, so that that can be an option for us to push forward to, so that we can get the same initiative here as well. We can save a lot more lives if we
Yeah.
can get that initiative.
Well, Ashley, I just, like you said, this has been a beautiful journey, that we didn't end it in Minneapolis and that we continued
Yeah.
this cross nation. And I'm going to bring Monisha back on, and she could probably respond to some of the things that she heard you mention. And she's been sharing about what it took to get I-940, because I thought 218 was like the start. And then she's like, "Oh no, it was years before that." So I'm even
Mm.
learning.
Wow, wow, wow. Yeah, that's interesting. I heard a little bit, heard a little bit.
It's interesting. There was a myth, and part of the opposition to Initiative 940 was that nobody would want to be a police officer if we passed it. That if I-940 passed, and this was, there's always a boogeyman towards progress and change. And the boogeyman there was, if it is passed, nobody will want to be a law enforcement officer because it would make their jobs too hard. And that's happened around a lot of different police accountability measures. People have used the specter of nobody will do this job if this is the case. And what we're finding with a lot of young people who are interested in serving in law enforcement is that they don't want to serve in a profession that they don't believe is fair and just. They don't want to serve in a profession that they see as dishonest. And so this accountability has not created the mass exodus that was predicted. And in fact, as we are trying to recruit new people, young people to law enforcement, they are leaning towards those agencies that have strong systems of both inclusion and accountability, because they want to be seen as being a part of the solution. Many people who choose to serve because they want to help others. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to root out those who do it because of the access to power. Because there is a really different reason why you choose different professions. There is the potential to take life and liberty as a law enforcement officer. And so, that sort of power can attract people to that profession who don't have the community's best interests at heart. And so initiatives like 940 help us to attract the right type of people to law enforcement. And that's why this sort of work is so important, is because nobody is denigrating people who choose to serve, but we have to weed out those folks who are serving themselves and not serving the public.
And that's a great segue before we go to break about Jeff Nelson. And later on, when you hear how the judge spoke during sentencing, but I was up to the point of arraignment. So when we enter into arraignment, there was no bail put on him. He was a free man when he entered into that courtroom. And that was the first time our family and any of us ever put a face to this person. And I remember saying to the prosecution that I wanted to be able to ask for an arraignment. And I was shocked that no one had one. So that was my first time that I was able to address the judge and actually turn to Jeff Nelson and look at him and say, you murdered, Jesse. And at that time, Carrie, his mother, was alive. And she was there in the courtroom with me, which was really empowering because she also got to see the man that killed her son. And we only were able to get $500,000 bail. He was arrested at 10 a.m., taken into custody, and by 5 p.m., he made his bail. And he was put on paid administrative house arrest. And as I tell the story later on, he was on paid administrative house arrest for 4 years. So we're going to pause now and go into our break, and then we could all kind of talk about the next step of this as soon as that starts.
The Mother's Justice Show is brought to you by H.G. Walden and the Virtues Healing Circles. Join us for Wisdom and Wellness with Reverend Walden, a monthly virtual and in-person healing circle that focuses on community healing and growth. Learn more at virtueshealing.com. That's virtueshealing.com. Also, be sure to join our healing group on Facebook. Again, visit us at virtueshealing.com today.
Hello, welcome back to Mother's Justice Show. Reverend Harriett was so kind to allow us to co-host this. We're going to bring back on Ashley, and we want to have an opportunity to hear what it's like for a young mother to be fighting for justice for her son who was murdered in a different state, and what that journey's been like for her, and basically how we as a community can offer support.
Okay, so to kind of go a little bit back, so Jalen was killed in a traffic stop. So I do want to put that out there. About 2 weeks before Tyree Nichols, he was visiting his family in Memphis. He's from Atlanta, born and raised. That's where we're from. And his father's side resides. They're from Memphis and lives in Memphis, Tennessee. So the boys just went out, got stopped by the police. The driver of the car, um, they say the car was suspicious. The driver of the car ran a red light. They put on the sirens, put on the blue lights. The sirens did not work. And the boy crashed, and all boys got out the car and ran. So that's kind of what Jalen's story is. Um, Jalen was shot 6 times. He was shot in the back of the leg, which actually broke the skeleton bone of his leg. He also was shot in the left leg and the right leg in the front, and then also his chest and his arm. I'm not going to really go too much about the details because we are getting ready for court in August. So I kind of want to stay a little clear of certain details. But that's pretty much the injuries that he received. He also had blunt force trauma to the face. And you could Google Jalen's story. You can also look at the video from the police car, as well as the body cam footage of the officer, the partner of the officer that actually shot Jalen. The officer that shot Jalen cut off his body camera after roll call, so before he started his shift. So we don't have any footage from his body camera, but we do have some from his partner. Very limited, but it is some. There are a lot of discrepancies within Jalen's story, so I'll put that out there. And as we're really getting ready for trial, we need as much support as we can get. Jalen was 20 years old. He had no children. He was in school. He worked a full-time job. He was a very spiritual person, loved family, loved life, wanted to do music. He's just like any other 20-year-old. And so it's really, really sad that I would never become a grandmother. I would never see him get married or buy a house or buy a car or any of those things. So I was really cut short in being his mom. And so I had to enjoy those pieces that I were able to enjoy. But one of the things that makes Jalen's story so challenging is that he was killed in another state. Being in another state and your child get in another state, it's still there's no special rules, no special accommodations to figure out what happened to your loved one. So literally we had to, from day one, really get an attorney because I was not a citizen of Tennessee. I couldn't file any type of FOIA act. I couldn't get any type of information about Jalen's story or Jalen's incident. They wouldn't give me a police report. They wouldn't give me an incident report. All they would tell me is that it was under investigation, like they tell everybody else, the same story. And when the investigation is over, then they'll let me know. Well, I don't know how you can tell a parent, I'm not gonna tell you what's going on with your child, and my son is murdered in a whole nother state. So we went looking for attorneys. Like we didn't have an option to try to do some things by ourselves. We didn't have that option. We even put money into the system. I paid one attorney $5,000 a retainer. Off the rip. Like, no, I had no choice. Didn't know what I was doing. Didn't know anybody in the movement to say, hey, you need a civil rights attorney. There's no retainer when, you go that route. Just not knowledgeable about anything and did not know where to go. And that's what a lot of families are dealing with. And then you have the complexity of your child being in another state and killed and you have no rights or no special accommodations. So on top of me not knowing what I'm doing, on top of not knowing what happened that night, knowing that I talked to my son like 2 hours before he died, an hour before he died, through a text, 2 hours verbally before he died, and nobody can tell me what's going on. It was like the worst experience ever. And so it just made me get in pit bull mode. I'm not gonna even lie to you. Like I had to
Yep,
just
I've seen
go.
it.
Yeah, I had to go, and I just knew that we weren't really supported like that because of the narrative that they put out on my son, that it was four black boys, all dressed in black, all armed, but it was only one deceased. Then at that time when they said it, they never put a gun on the TV. They only aired it once. And the other three boys had never been questioned. Nobody knew where they were. So we knew of one of the boys in the car because it was a relative. But outside of that, the other two we did not know. We knew the car wasn't stolen. Um, and then we knew an incident had happened a couple of hours before then where it was a white Infinity and it was a domestic situation. So we're all lost. We're digging through Google trying to figure out the story. And when they put the narrative out, I'm like, this just don't make no sense. I don't understand how one is deceased, three on the run, you don't know where they are. Nobody went after the driver, and Jalen was a passenger of the car. So why are you even bothering him? You can't write him a ticket for running a red light. He was a passenger. So why was your eyes even set on Jalen anyway? So it was just
Wow.
so many pieces that just did not make sense. Um, we just found out not too long ago that Jalen was shot in the arm. We for the longest thought his arm was disfigured because the autopsy said that he had a gunshot related wound and did not list all the information like it did a typical gunshot. So there's so many moving pieces in Jalen's story, from them listening to killer rap music, driving during a chase, for the officer texting, cutting off the body camera, to the sirens not working, to them just saying they wanted to stop them because the car was suspicious, to just so many moving pieces that just did not make sense at all, still don't make sense. And add him dying out, dying in another state to all of that.
Ashley, that brought up an interesting thought. Your civil attorney are they out of Tennessee or are they out of Georgia?
So this is our third set of attorneys. The first set of attorney, I end up dropping them because they just did some wonky stuff that I didn't kind of like and I didn't trust. So at this point, when you're looking for an attorney for something like this, you got to really trust them. So we let them go. The second attorney dropped us two, maybe 3 weeks before it was time for the statute to run out for a year. So in some states, you have two
We
years,
have two
3 years.
years in
And in
Washington.
Tennessee, there's only 1 year,
Oh,
which is crazy because, and what I mean to you guys, you only have 1 year to file civil. Um, you don't even get the information from TBI or Bureau of Investigation in a year. They may take 6, 7, 8 months to give it to you. And so now you're pressed trying to get all this stuff together to file. So we got dropped because Tennessee would not give them any information. And I had to file pro se. So filing pro se, you guys, is where you become your own attorney at that moment. You file complaint against the
right.
city, the officers, or who else you're trying to sue. One good thing about pro se is that it doesn't, even though they're the same standards, the judges doesn't they don't look at it as harsh as they look at it as a lawyer writing it. So if you make mistakes, it's okay.
Mm.
Will allow you to fix it because they know you don't have that law background. So they give you a little leeway instead of being a little bit tougher like they would on a traditional attorney or lawyer who's writing it for you. So that I like to put that out there because a lot of people get scared. What you mean you did a pro se? You wasn't scared to do that? Well, I didn't have a choice. I
And
literally,
that is such an important thing, Ashley, because then other families are just letting that statute of limitation disappear, and
mm-hmm,
then no offense, but then they'll complain, oh,
yep,
but you went and took your own initiative. Oh my God, that is
I
so,
did. And
thank
to
you.
and to even add to it is I had to go down to Memphis to file because I was not able to do it electronically. So some circuits allow you to file electronically, and then some circuits you have to file in person. So not only did I have to get this thing written up, based on the little information that we had, and it had to be good enough to stand. So for us to be getting ready to go to court, our pro se complaint was good enough for us to be able for an attorney to pick it up and move forward.
Wow.
So, it's not as hard as people think it is. So if you need help with writing pro se, you need help, reach out. I will help you. We have an amazing group of us. It's another mother that I work with that has filed pro se. Eric Holmes, he was killed in Georgia. So you can do it. It is not as hard as you think it is. Don't be scared. Don't let the system fool you. But it's really important to, and I say this because I'm a justice person. I believe criminal is more so what I'm looking for justice. Not necessarily just civil, but some families civil is okay. But it is you don't want that time to run out, and you have to get on the board game somewhere. You got to get on the field, on the playing field. And if on that playing field is you filing civil, then do it.
Exactly.
You got
And
to
the thing,
start somewhere, because if you don't, time's gonna run out and you're not gonna be able to get that time back.
and that's the uniqueness of having the different trajectories of all families. With us, we started as a civil as well. So when we met with the prosecutor, we were already in our civil journey, and that was then they contacted our civil lawyer for that meeting. That's why it was very interesting, because when they first came in, I just wasn't sure, well, why are they here? This is a great time for us to take a break, and then we could regroup for the last 15 minutes.
Okay.
The Mother's Justice Show is brought to you by H.G. Walden and the Virtues Healing Circles. Join us for Wisdom and Wellness with Reverend Walden, a monthly virtual and in-person healing circle that focuses on community healing and growth. Learn more at virtueshealing.com. That's virtueshealing.com. Also, be sure to join our healing group on Facebook. Again, visit us at virtueshealing.com today.
Welcome back to the Mother Justice Show. I'm just going to do a quick little snippet again on the Jesse Sarey story. I'm fast forwarding it to sentencing. So we finally went in after the trial. He was convicted by the jury, and at sentencing was a very interesting experience. His side was heavily police presence. I don't even know if there was anyone that was non-police there, because his wife is a police officer, her father's a police officer, the mayor of Auburn was sitting on that side, the chief of police was sitting over there, and it was just like overwhelming of them continuing to support this man who was a 3-time killer and had been convicted. And so just so that the audience know, he got 16 years and 8 months. He's in solitary, I believe, for his own protection. And I look at it as now he's going to get to know who he is, because that's who his company is. And we are on one last phase, and our last phase is to get him decertified. He was taken off paid administrative leave on conviction day. So the 6 months up to sentencing, he was no longer being paid. However, he was still considered a police officer. He was not fired until after sentencing, within that week. And that to us was really just not fair to our family and to Brian Scammon's family and Isaiah Obit, because all of them were casualties of this man's actions. And so that is where I'm now following. I'm following the decertification. He is on the Brady list, which is good. And one of the things that we need to talk about, we're going to turn it over to Data, is also following these officers to make sure that they don't jump state or go someplace else and another jurisdiction or county inherits somebody that has these bad actors. So I'm going to turn this over to Monisha, and Ashley and I had talked about data, and she was surprised how much data Washington State have. I mean, we have quite an immense data collection, and you could go in and really start looking. The oldest case I know of was my original foster daughter back in 1990, probably about 2000. I don't remember what year. But at that point was the first time I learned about someone that had lost their father to police brutality. And to this date, she still has not even had a voice. And I keep trying to push her. I'm like, April, you need to talk about your father, but she was a baby when that happened. So I'm going to turn this over to Monisha.
Yeah, the point about data is a really important one, because whenever you bring a piece of legislation or you want to talk about potential changes in law, one of the things lawmakers will always ask you is, what is the data to back up your this piece of legislation? They always ask for the data. And when we were working on Initiative 940, one of the questions was, well, how many people are impacted by this? What is your data to say that this is needed? Another one of those strawman arguments. And what I found out at the time was that Washington State did not keep any records for how many people were harmed or killed by law enforcement within the course of the year. The state had no idea how many people would be impacted by this law because they weren't keeping that sort of data. So if you can imagine that we can't even keep the most basic data of how many people are killed by, a government employee's hands, that is really telling. And so we knew that Initiative 940 wasn't the end, right? We knew that it was something that was needed. We were doing this work without knowing that, there would be a Jesse Sarey. We did this work to protect the families who had been there before and to hopefully keep families in the future more whole. But we had no idea who might be helped by this legislation. With that said, we knew it wasn't the end because we knew there were so many areas to fix. And so, the big work that we had done to finally get this passed in November of 2018, we kind of disbanded a little bit. We were in the process of, well, now that you pass a law, then you have to work on implementation. And we were working on the areas of implementation for the law, but really our collective, our coalition had begun to kind of dissipate and return to, a little bit of the life they had before all of this intense work. Fast forward to May of 2020 in the murder of George Floyd. And we were one of the few collectives that actually had experience bringing police accountability measures forward. And so at that point in time, because now it was politic, we had a ton of legislators reaching out going, you said you had more that we needed to do. What more do we need to do? So we had a ton of legislators saying, okay, what's next? Whereas we were really having to push and pull ourselves as this collective. Now we were in this moment where people were like, we want to be seen on the right side of history. What do you have for us? And it required us to reconvene quickly to be able to utilize that moment. I think Washington State was more successful in passing good initiatives because we had already been doing the work. We already had the muscle memory from being a collective and working together, building out the kinks of working with and trusting and fighting, and also coming to a good conclusion with that group. And so that allowed us to bring a suite of other pieces of legislation forward in that following legislative cycle post George Floyd, as everybody was then calling for, what do we need to do? And so you never know when the moment, when the environment is going to push you towards now is the time. And when that moment comes, you then have to be ready to take that moment and lean into it and do everything you can. There are a lot of things we learned in that moment in 2020 as well, which is, having your game plan ready is really important. Some days it's going to be drip, 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 and you're working and you're, okay, what is the next best thing you can work on? What is the next best thing? And then sometimes you really have to run because you've got to use the wins you have to push things forward. What I will say is there may have been one or two pieces of legislation that weren't quite ready that we felt pressured into moving forward because, again, the political wins, there were political players who wanted it. And I would caution against pushing something forward where it needs a little bit more work because it could set back the movement when those things go wrong. But the other piece of that is you can't do a darn thing without initiative, without a coalition of people. The coalition has to be ready because you can't sprint a marathon. You have to have people who can pick up the ball and step in for you. You have to be able to take your breaks. Otherwise, it is a recipe for burnout and to not get anything done. And so the one thing I also learned with coalition work is knowing when to be able to take your breaks and knowing when you need to lean in and having the mutual respect and work ethic to be able to do that with the group that you're working with.
And that is so, so important because I did join the coalition, the Washington Coalition for Police Accountability, but I ended up taking that break. I knew that I had that 1 year of sweeping. I think we did 14 bills in that year. And then I needed to start getting ready for what I was about to be part of. And if I can give any advice to anyone, and Ashley included, do not ever miss any motion hearings. Don't miss anything, because if you miss even one and they decide to redact something or not have it in the trial, and you walk into that courtroom and you're like, well, why didn't they show Nelson's tattoos? Or why did they not do something? You can't question it at that point. I mean, it took a month and a half of motions to figure out what they were going to do with his tattoos. And it wasn't until he was sentenced and convicted that all of a sudden his tattoos were showing. He couldn't hide them with his jail outfit. And that was the first time that people started seeing his tattoos and seeing exactly why it was such a controversy. The other thing is sitting through the jury duty. It was 15 days, but every single day was important because I was also mentally saying, who do I want on that jury? Even though I didn't get to vote, I still was doing my tallies, and I even sent it to the prosecutor saying, well, these are my top. The only thing I learned is, and then I'll let this get into the wrap up, was once they went from 133 and they took a seat and then all of a sudden became 5, I got lost. I couldn't figure out who I voted on became number 5. And so that was the piece that I have to go back in now and start figuring out, well, did I even pick the right juror? But 3 of our jurors showed up for sentencing, and to that speaks volumes. God, we could talk forever. I just want to thank you, Ashley. I know we're going to meet up again on this journey. Monisha, we've continued to intersect, and I hope that Jesse Sarey was what I-940 was hoping for. I truly believe, that I believe Jesse is significant. I think that he is a template of what could go right in a I-940 trial. And so I want to thank the people of I-940. I don't know a lot of you, but I want to thank you for putting in place an initiative that not only Jesse benefit from, but Brian Scammon and Isaiah Obit's family.
it's really, I would have never, there is a point of you plant seeds and you have no idea who will sit under that shade. And it was absolutely an honor to be a part of knowing that in the future, families have an opportunity to seek justice, and that there is, one less honestly murderer on the streets and serving our communities. So that makes it worth it.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Ashley. Last words. We're about to be cut off in like 30 seconds.
Thank you for having me again.
Thank you, Harriet, for letting us co-host.
Yes.